Since it is 5 o'clock, I prepare my mate to talk.
Wonderful. Okay, we're about to go live, so hopefully this works.
Okay.
Apologies, it's just slow to load.
I'm looking at it on Facebook and it worked, and now it says it's waiting for a live signal. So
Yeah, it's the connection timed out, I think, for whatever reason with the, sorry, apologies. We always have this issue with our live streaming. Okay. Let me try again. Apologies.
No problem at all.
We can always rely on technical difficulties.
I'm also on the Wi-Fi of the university because
Okay.
if the Ethernet, I have like 3 screens and then it goes crazy. So I just,
Okay.
So if something happened, don't worry, I will connect to the Ethernet of the university and it will work. But usually it works, no problem at all.
Okay, perfect.
In, I don't know, 5 years, I haven't figured out how to do work with the screen. So
I know it's so frustrating. Yeah, I can see it. It's not connecting on my end. Oh shoot. Ariane, would you be able to try if I'm just going to try one more time. It's loading, and if it doesn't connect, then would you be okay to try from your end?
I don't think I have access to the Facebook page. So
Okay.
that it's not that I don't want to, it's just I think I'm not connected that way.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Then so it's not working on my end. So did we want to try for you, Julia? And then I'll just make you a host. And if something happens, you can.
Sure. Or Patricia,
can
would you
try
be able
to,
to
yeah.
try?
Patricia, okay, great. I will
Yeah.
make you a host then. Apologies. Host. Okay, great.
I think I will have the same problem as Ariane because I'm not able to join without my account.
If you just sign in, and if you're linked to the page, you should be able to. So if you just sign into your regular account and then you just connect to the page to share to the class page, you should be okay. Because
Yeah,
I signed into my account and then you just share to the class page and it should work if the connection works because I just tried to do it and it was timing out.
Yeah, so Patricia, first you have to go to the little icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen that says more. Did you first go there? And then I think in that menu, there's an option to share to live stream.
Can I continue as like me?
Yeah, continue as you, and then you just share to the page. So there should be an option share to your page, and then class should be one of your options.
Okay, preparing to live stream.
Can you see it, Ariane?
Now it's still having the little broadcast is waiting for a signal.
I think it's working though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you
Great.
think it's working? I mean, I see it.
It might just be taking a minute to load.
Okay, I see myself live, but I don't know how do I send this to class?
It should already be on class's page.
On
If
class?
it's not, then oh yeah, I think it should be already on class's page. Is everyone else seeing it?
I don't see it. All I see is basically a 20-second snippet that says that we were live.
Yeah.
So you might not be, are you sharing it maybe to your own personal page rather than the
Yeah, I think that's
class page? So you need to start the process over and make sure that it's sharing to class's page.
live. Second.
Yeah, I followed the
Facebook.
link. Yeah, it was sharing to your own page, Patricia.
Continue as. Who could see this? The only thing, I don't know how to send it to class.
Well, I think so we don't have any more delays. If it's live on your page, we'll just share the link to class just so that we don't have too much more delay.
So I'll go live again.
Great.
So there's like a little drop down menu. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll just continue with that option.
Yeah. Oh. Do you see it?
On mine, it says Facebook, and it says the content of this meeting has been sent to Facebook. So I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Ariane and Julia, can you confirm if it's on Patricia's page?
I think it is, yes.
Okay, great, perfect. So we can get started. So I'll hand it over to you, Julia, and then Patricia, just share the link to our class page if you can.
Yeah, just make sure that it's public when you share it.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, I'll figure that out now.
Wonderful. We can get started.
So, sorry, do you want me to start with the land acknowledgement?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our October webinar. Today, we are welcoming Dr. José Iriarte, who will be presenting his research on rock art in the Colombian Amazon. And before we get started, while we meet in a virtual platform, we would also like to acknowledge the importance of the land which we call home. From coast to coast, we respectfully acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people who call this land home. And I'll do that again in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking viewers. Antes de comenzar, mientras se van uniendo los participantes a la reunión virtual, nos gustaría reconocer la importancia de la tierra que cada uno consideramos y llamamos hogar. De costa a costa, reconocemos con humildad y agradecimiento el territorio ancestral y eterno perteneciente al pueblo inuit, Métis y primeras naciones cuyo hogar es esta tierra. Ahora le paso la palabra a mi compañera, quien presentará a nuestro invitado.
Great, thank you so much, Julia. So I have the pleasure of welcoming Professor José Iriarte from the University of Exeter, who's an archaeologist and archaeobotanist whose research focuses on human environmental interactions, the development of agricultural economies, and the emergence of early complex societies in lowland South and Central America. Dr. Iriarte has extensive experience in directing and participating in a wide range of international projects across Latin America on the themes integrating archaeology, paleoecology, soil science, remote sensing, and modern ecology. These multidisciplinary projects have enabled him to explore human-environmental interactions in depth, providing clear evidence on the timing and nature of human impact on tropical and subtropical ecosystems. He directs the University of Exeter Archaeobotany and Paleoecology Laboratory and is a specialist in phytoanalyses on microscopic plant remains. He's currently the principal investigator of the European Research Council CLAAS Journey and is the author of The Archaeology of Amazonia, Human History. So without further ado, Dr. Iriarte, we welcome you to begin.
Okay. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to present my research here at CLAAS. Today I'm going to tell you about the work I'm doing about investigating the peopling of Amazonia. For that, I think, and to frame our work in Amazonia, I think it's important to frame Amazonia and South America within our global journey of human dispersion. As most of you know, modern humans evolved around 300 to 200,000 years before the present in Africa. They left Africa about 70,000 years ago to start colonizing the 6 continents, arriving to Australia about 50,000 years ago, and then they get to the Americas between 25 and 15 years before the present. I cannot go in this presentation about all the debates on the peopling of the America because it will take my whole presentation, and I want you to present you some of the findings we have done in La Lindosa, but needless to say, the when and how people get to South America, the timing, the tempo, and the different routes are a matter of discussion. And here you can see some of the main theories that have been proposed. The peopling of South America is one of these periods of human history that we can call it one of these hot periods because several things happen at the same time, right? We have the human dispersion into virtually empty landscapes, and this happened at a time during the late Pleistocene of major climate change. It is coeval with the extinction of the megafauna, and it also when people start manipulating and creating new plants in the new world. And ultimately, all this resulted in the huge diversity of Native Americans that we see today in the South American continent. Our project is called Last Journey. It has, unfortunately, it has ended the 30th of September, just a few days ago, and look at the colonization at the last continent other than Antarctica on Earth, this last stop of humans in this last continental terra incognita. When we look at the timeline of Amazonian history, the 13,000 years of Amazonian history, the projects have concentrated where it is highlighted at your left is the period of human dispersal that started around 13 years before the present. To study this human colonization, especially of South America, thanks to European funding, we have been able to put together an international interdisciplinary team that have integrated all these subdisciplines of archaeology, as you can see in the picture, from archaeology and archaeobotany to zooarchaeology, rock art, paleoclimate, isotope analysis, and ancient DNA. When we start looking at the peopling of South America, it is good to have this north-south vision as a bird's eye view as we are looking from here, especially because entering South America was done through this bottleneck that is called the El Darién Gap. Studying the peopling of Northwestern South America is very interesting because all these humans encounter an unprecedented diversity of landscapes. As possibly most of the audience knows, the Andean Cordillera, when it gets to what we call today Colombia, split into 3 branches, which creates a diversity of environments that we can see here. So in Colombia, these early hunter-gatherers faced from the bottom, from savannas to tropical forest, to seasonal forest, to montane forest, to what we call today these alpine tundras that we call paramos, basically going from 0 to 5,000 meters above sea level, and have some temperature differences of 30 degrees. Here we can see some speculation, a diagram that shows some speculation about the potential routes that these groups may have taken. They may have taken the coast, and they may have gone through the, let me see if I can get the, no. Okay, can you see my mouse? Oh, yeah, they may have taken the coast through the Pacific, or they may have taken the Caribbean, or they may have also taken some interior routes that may have been attractive, like the Magdalena River or the Cauca River. Our study region, we have worked in several areas of Colombia, but today I'm going to focus this talk in the Colombian Amazon, and our study region is what we call today the department of Guaviare, and we have worked in the location that we know as the Serranía de la Lindosa. This is an area that is very well known because of all the work of Rachel Dolmatov with the Tucano, and especially his book Amazonian Cosmos, but also is very well known because of the Chiribiquete National Park, where Carlos Castaño has been doing work for a long time. Again, we are not the first ones to arrive to the area. The area was the stronghold of the FARC guerrillas until 2016, when a peace agreement was agreed between the government and the FARC. In 2018, the Serranía de la Lindosa was declared a protected archaeological area, and this allowed researchers to come back to the area and start research. And this is where with my colleague Gaspar, my Colombian colleague Gaspar Morcote Rios and Javier Aceituno, we enter into the scene. This is an area that was incredibly attractive for hunter-gatherers. It's an area where to the north you have the savannas of the Llanos, to the south you have the tropical forest, but it's also a micro-ecotone where you have the Guayabero River with the flooded forest, with a lot of riverine and terrestrial resources. You have the mesa top tepuyes that provides visibility, and also the tepuyes that provides rock shelters. Just to give you an idea of how the area looks like, here we can see a view of the tepuyes, a view of the tropical forest, the Guayabero River flowing through through the through the tropical forest, and also something very important in the lower right corner, we have canyons and rapids in the area. Just for you to give you an idea of how the landscape look like in the Serranía de la Lindosa. During our work, we did 6 field seasons of survey and excavation. We have been able to, well, to detect and excavate 4 archaeological sites that goes back to the Pleistocene, which have produced most of the information that I'm going to be providing for you today. Here you have a map of the region with some of the major sites. And of course, something that I'm going to dedicate part of my talk, the Serranía de la Lindosa has some incredible, amazing rock art. We like to say that pretty much the whole biodiversity of the Amazon is depicted in this painting. So let's go and produce a summary of the major findings of our project. So in terms of chronology, we have been able to dig these 4 sites, and based on 66 radiocarbon dates that we have been able to model using variation methods, we have been able to define 4 major phases of occupation in the Serranía de la Lindosa. The first one is starting in the late Pleistocene during the Younger Dryas, is the initial occupation of the area, 12,600 years before the present. Then we have the second one, that is the early to mid Holocene, starting around 10,000 years before the present. During the mid Holocene, something that is very interesting and not only happens in the Serranía de la Lindosa, but happens in many areas of the Amazon, we have a hiatus, more or less between 6 and 2,000 years before the present. And then we have the late Holocene. The lithic technology is very simple, is expedient, is mainly produced on local chert and quartz small nodules. Most of them are very small, less than 10 centimeters. Ana Aguirre has done his PhD looking at the lithic technology, and she has found that, well, there are very short production sequences. Mainly, most of the assemblage is made of used flakes, a few ones retouched, and she has found that these used flakes mainly have a straight, convex, and concave working edges that was possibly used for cutting and scraping. Here we see some of the earliest contexts that have yielded these beveled flakes. Here we see at one of the sites that is called Cerro Montoya, some of the earliest contexts where we see some hearth, where debitage is around the hearth, and in the middle of the excavation we see some rocks. So they may have been doing some napping activities while sitting on these rocks, is what the analysis, the spatial analysis is telling us. Okay. In terms of diet, if we look at plants, we have done an important, I will say, an important flotation program. Here we have my colleague Gaspar Morcote Rios from Universidad Nacional de Colombia conducting the flotation in a stream very nearby the excavations. We have done a lot of reference collections. We have worked with our botanist, Colombian botanist, Saúl Hoyos from Universidad de Antioquia, but also with local indigenous people like Víctor Caicedo, and also, again, Gaspar Morcote Rios, who is the curator of the Herbaria Nacional de Colombia, has been building all the reference collection needed to identify the archaeological plants. Well, this is just, I'm not going to bore you going to the nitty-gritty and specific details of all these diagrams. but just it's interesting to say that from very early on, these are macrobotanical remains. More than 50,000 macrobotanical remains have been recovered from the excavations. The assemblages are dominated by palms, and as we're going to see, mainly by 3 palms, but many of the palms that possibly most of you know, like Tucumán, that is Astrocarium, or Acai, Euterpe, or what is the domesticated version of Bactris chonta, is present from very early context. Here we have some of the more important one, just for you to see pictures like Siagrus orinocensis, Atalea insignis, Atalea maripi, and Mauritia flexuosa, that are very common in the macrobotanical record. Something that is very interesting is that when we look at high magnification in the scanning electron microscope, many of these palm mesocarps have collapsed tissues that suggest us that these palms were not eaten raw, but they were part of preparation. Possibly they were mashing them for some kind of fermentation, for some kind of dough. So these are the kind of information we are getting with the use of a scanning electron microscope. It's interesting to see that the availability of palm resources in the area is pretty much year-round. And another thing that is interesting is that the palms that are more abundant in the archaeobotanical record are the ones that are more available throughout the year. That obviously doesn't come as a surprise, but it's interesting to see that year-round you have this availability of palm resources in the area. Not only palms are recorded, but we have been able to document a lot of roots. Here you have looking at, again at high magnification, small carbonized clamps of material that shows parenchyma tissue, root parenchyma tissue, that is likely related to the consumption of roots, of geophytes. This is not only seen, again, I'm not going to bore you with getting into the phytoliths, but this is not only seen in the parenchyma tissue of carbonized remains, but also we can see that in the phytoliths, like Heliconia, Platanillo, Phenacospermus guianensis, many species of Costus, and also of Maranta, possibly wild versions of Maranta arundinacea arrowroot. And again, the work of my colleague Javier Aceituno from Universidad de Antioquia is looking at the starch grains from the plant processing tools. Some of these sites have a lot of manos, and he has also been extracting residue from flakes, and he has been able to identify starch grains of Heliconia, Platanillo, Phenacospermus guianensis, Costus, and Maranta from very early context. So not only palms and a few tree fruits, but also we see the use of roots. Last but not least, we see the presence of nuts. This is Bertholletia excelsia, Brazil nut, that arrives around 7,000 years before the present to the archaeobotanical record in this region. Is the first record of Brazil nut in the area. Okay, now let's look at the animals, the zooarchaeology. Here is interesting because only one site, the site that has the orange rim, the site that is called Cerro Azul, is the only one who produced some bone remains. It produced a lot of bone remains, as we can see here, more than 80,000 fragments of bones, but very few are the diagnostics. And this is mainly due to the fact that the assemblage is extremely fragmented, as you can see in the picture, but most of the bones are less than 1 centimeter long. As you can see here, most of the assemblage is dominated by fishes, then by small mammals, reptiles, and and bivalves. This is interesting because something that my colleague Mark Robinson has done is he has looked at all the animals that are painted in the rock art, and we have been able to do this comparison from the bones versus all the animals that are represented in La Lindosa. And something that is very striking is that all the large animals that are depicted in the paintings, and that they are extremely abundant in the paintings, like the tapir, the peccaries, all the primates, and all the carnivores are not present in the zooarchaeological record. And the fishes and armadillos that are extremely abundant in the zooarchaeological record only have 1 or 2 paintings in the hundreds of, in the thousands of paintings that we have in La Lindosa. So my colleague Joe Osborne, that is the zooarchaeologist, have been looking at this question: where are the large mammals? And obviously several options appear. One is that something that has been seen all over the world. People don't eat what they paint. Also, these sites, we need to remember, that are close to rock art, are very close to the tepuis, so this could be very special activity, ritual sites, that only certain menus are allowed. Also could be that the large mammals were processed and eaten somewhere else. Or it also could be something that is looking into that the largest mammals, such as the tapir, the deer, the peccary, and the monkeys, are least frequently identified due to the fragmentation and are analytically absent. When we look at this graph, we can see that all the taxonomically distinctive parts of medium and large size mammals are harder to identify when they are heavily fragmented. So this is very likely a problem of the fragmentation of the bones. And this can also be illustrated just with the, as we call it in the Rio de la Plata, the tattoos, the armadillo, where we can see the top fur parts are the ones that survive, and only 5% of what are the expected less tough parts, that are the non-osteoderms, are present in the faunal assemblage. So there is a big bias in the zooarchaeological assemblage, and this is something we are working on at the moment. Let's talk a little bit about the rock art. The rock art, as I say, is very diverse. Serranía de la Lindosa, there is a huge diversity of animals, and we can see in these pictures. Plants are also very well represented. We have humans in the paintings. A lot of handprints are located just in one side that is called Cerro Azul. Our colleague Barbara Ostervik have been able to identify close to 1,000 handprints that comprises 13 different type of decorations within the handprints. Hopefully this will be in wall archaeology very soon. There are a lot of hybrids, part human, part animals, what are called therianthropes in the rock art, and also there are a lot of dances represented in the rock art. I think geometrics also are very geometricos, are very present. And we have been trying to date this rock art. It has improved very simple. Here we have Hipólito, two rock art specialists, Hipólito Collado and Sara Garcés, who have been visiting La Lindosa and been doing pigment characterization to see if we are able to get some organic matter, some organic binders to be able to date the paintings. So far, without success. Unfortunately, the paintings of the Serranía de la Lindosa also do not have these nice carbonate layers that allow us to date the painting. So we are working on this problem. What we can say at the moment is what we found in the archaeological excavations. In the very early context, we have ochre pigments in the excavations, and then around 10,400 years before the presence, what we found is ochre tablets that, as you can see on your left, have present use wear. But obviously, these ochre tablets can be used to paint the walls, but can also be used to paint your body or instruments and so forth. I think the best proof we have for the when people started to paint in La Lindosa is this exfoliated fragment of the wall that appear in very well dated context to 10,400 years before the present. So based on the current evidence that we have, we can suggest that, well, people started to paint the walls of La Lindosa at least 10,400 years, more or less, before the present. We have been doing in one particular site that is called Cerro Montoya, where we have recovered more than 150 pieces of ochre with used wear. We have been doing pigment characterization. This is the work of Sergio Andrade, who has found that most of these tablets are made of ochre, hematite, and red earth. And when we look at them over time, we can see that this violet color that is hematite is the most abundant across time, and is one that increases over time, suggesting that people is increasingly over time selecting hematite over the other pigments. And then we have something that has been very controversial that I think the audience would like to know a little bit more is the fact that many of the paintings resemble the large mammals of the last ice age. Here we can start with something that appeared to be a ground sloth, a mastodon, a camelid, horses, and in the earth, something that could resemble some bodies with con trompas. I forgot the word for trompas. That could be Macrauqueña, for example. Let's look very briefly at them and what are the challenges that we face when we try to identify these paintings as megafauna. Obviously, the documentation of megafauna is nothing new. It's something that, as we can see very briefly in this picture, happen all over the world. It has contributed to major debates in academy. Is some of the hottest and most controversial topics in rock art research. And something to start with is that we see from very early on, associated to all the early sites in South America, we can see that we have geometric and figurative art in most of these early sites. Identifying megafauna is not very easy because these animals no longer exist. No, so here we have in this diagram, we have in black the animals that have disappeared, and we have in green the animals that still exist. Something right away, a take-home lesson that we can get from this diagram is that there were a lot of animals that went extinct, 80% in South America, and some of them may be painted in the rock art. They no longer exist, but luckily, what we have in South America that we don't have, for example, in other places like Australia, is that we have complete skeletons of megafauna from where Arctic reconstruction could be better made. And also we have been working with paleontologists Michael Ziegler and Mike Kesey to try to correlate the paintings with potential megafauna. The other challenge that we face when looking at megafauna is that, well, megafauna are these are basically artistic expressions. These are not photographic copies of the animals that the artist, quote unquote, saw. So we have the autonomy of art from the real world. We have all the stylistic, cultural codes, the different aspects of ontological and cosmological aspects. We need to put into the mix the skills of the painting, and all that make it that is not easy to identify megafauna. What we know is that the people who arrived to La Lindosa were modern Homo sapiens that were capable of having abstract thought and creating art. We know that they arrived to La Lindosa at least 1,000 years before the megafauna get extinct, so they live with the megafauna for at least 1,000 years. We have ochre pigments for the very basal layers of all the occupations at this site. And also we know that megafauna was excavated. It was not present in La Lindosa. So far, we have no found megafauna in the sites, but we know it has been documented in different sites across Colombia, like Tibito and Taima, to put some examples, and some sites that are discussed in terms of archaeology, but are good paleoecological sites. In Pubenza, for example, they were in the Magdalena River. We have megafauna, entire mastodons, and their babies from around 20,000 years before the present. So the megafauna was there. Let's just start to look a little bit in more detail into all these different paintings. And here we have what could be a giant sloth. You can see that we can look at the prominent claws, the short rostrum, the large head, the robust thorax, and the number of digits in the feet in the pest. And this is something that if we look at this particular feature of the feet, and we use a little bit of imagination, what the painter of these potentially ground sloths was trying to convey was what we call pedolaterality, something that I learned with my colleague paleontologist, that is this inverted foot, where the dorsal surface faces outward and the flat surface of the foot faces inward. A possibility. It's interesting to see that it appears to be with an offspring, something that is very common in many of the paintings of La Lindosa, and always have miniature humans in a position of adoration to these large animals. Then we have the horses. The horses have these are characterized by these heavy heads and these robust neck. Here we have the artistic reconstruction of it, potentially a Hypiperon or Equus. Here there are other horses that have been identified by my colleague Urbina in other panels. And the horses here in one of the sites, we see another potential horse. And the horses is a tricky one because the horses became extinct at the end of the last age, but then were brought back by the Europeans. Something that is interesting is that in most of the post-colonial rock paintings that we see on horses, they all have the European riders on top of them. And none of the paintings of La Lindosa have riders on top of them. I know this is circumstantial and direct evidence that won't prove all. The other one is these pictures that appear to be a camelid. Here, potentially we have interpreted that maybe these painters are depicting what could be a paleolama. You can see the front legs, the small head, the long neck, sorry, the very distinctive camelid tail and the two toes that coincides with the appearance of a camelid. One of my colleagues told me, well, this is possibly a really badly drawn deer, and I will disagree with it because deer is the most depicted animal in La Lindosa, and they are never depicted like this. Here we see how deers are usually depicted in La Lindosa rock art. Here we see the reconstruction by Mike Pittkisey, sorry. Another potential paleolama. And then in this panel that we call the panel of the mastodon, we found this particular picture that has this trunk, has the fingers at the top of the trunk. This is how trompa is said, trunk. It has flare ears and have this moderate dome head that potentially could be a mastodon. Here we have the depiction. And here are other depictions that some have interpreted as a tapir, but others have interpreted as a potential mastodon too. Okay, the depiction in the Americas of megafauna is not unique, potentially unique to La Lindosa, but also we have this petroglyph of this Columbian mammoth in Utah. In Chiribiquete, here in the lower left corner, there is what Carlos Castaño and Carlos Lasso call the elephant. And also you have this engraved bone that was found in Vero Beach in Florida that appears to depict another mastodon. Okay, it's interesting to see that also always these large animals are positioned on the top of the panels. They are very prominent, unlike the rest of the rock art that is very cluttered. These large animals usually appear uncluttered. These remind me of the large naturalistic period of Australia, and they are always surrounded by miniature men that have the arms raised in a position that appear to be of adoration, of reverence. Okay, I think I talked about this in a previous slide. So let me just to finalize our talk, let me provide you with some conclusions that we are arriving to. The first thing is that the Colombian Amazon was populated around 12,600 years before the present. This is just a little bit more recent than the earliest dates that we have for the peopling of the Amazon, that is at the mouth of the Amazon in Caverna da Pedra Pintada, that happens about 13,100 years before the present. When we look at the Latin American context, we can see that is a relatively late the peopling of the peopling of Amazonia. If we compare with other sites along Colombia, like the Bogotá Plateau, or the savannas of coastal Venezuela, like the site of Tayma, the Central Andes and the desert coast of Peru, and, for example, the raincool forest in Monteverde, and even the Pampas, we can see that when we zoom out and look at the whole continent, the peopling of La Lindosa has been later than other parts of South America. It's interesting to see that I was talking about that early hunter-gatherers encounter a diversity of environments. And it's interesting to see that when we do look at this panoramic view of northwestern South America, and we look at all the lithic industries that were in place around 13,000 years ago, we see all this diversity of lithic industries that is possibly reflecting the different adaptations to all these different environments. At the same time, 13,000 years ago, that North America was pretty much covered by a single or dominated by a single culture like Clovis. What we see in northwestern South America is all this variety of unifacial and bifacial lithic industries. In terms of subsistence, what we can say is that the early inhabitants of La Lindosa, from the very onset, have a very broad spectrum, generalized economy, and that all the plants that we have recovered and animals evidence the exploitation of multiple habitats, from the flooded forests, the gallery forest, the floodplain, the savanna edges, the rocky outcrops, and the tropical forests, which reflect this kind of flexible foraging strategies right out the outset. We don't have a broad spectrum revolution here. From the very start, they are having a very broad spectrum diet. We know that palms dominate the archaeobotanical assemblage from the earliest levels, in particular Ciagrus orignocensis, Atalea maripa, and Astrocarium chambira are the ones that dominate the archaeobotanical assemblages. And what we can see at high magnification is that possibly not all were eaten raw, but they were preparing a pint. The root parenchyma, the phytoliths, and the starch grains indicate the long-term use of starches, and animals are dominated by small mammals and fishes that, although I have tried to convey to you, all these data need to be taken with a pinch of salt, because the assemblage is extremely fragmented, and this causes difficulties to identify the medium and the large mammals. Obviously, the data is showing something that we are seeing for decades, that obviously these early hunter-gatherers are very likely niche constructors. The tropical forests were not barriers for the human dispersal of these hunter-gatherer populations, and Amazonia is once again providing other example, like we see ethnographically across the world. I just want to finish telling you that all what you have seen about the rock art, you can read more in a couple of books that are online and are easily accessible, like the Painted Forest and the Archaeology of Amazonia. We have also have a venture with Google Arts and Culture, who have produced a website within their site showcasing the rock art. And here are the pictures to show you that we are working with the local communities that are associated in cooperatives and are engaged in archaeotourism. And for them, we have produced a diploma degree to contribute to their formation. And just to finish up, I want to thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks so much, Dr. Iriarte, for a very fascinating talk. We feel very fortunate to hear about these results that your team and you've been working on. So it's wonderful. I'd like to give anyone in the Zoom room the opportunity to ask Dr. Iriarte a question. So feel free to raise your hand or unmute to ask that. Well, if no one wants to jump in, I have a question. I was really interested in some of the discussion that you had around the placement of certain images in the rock art with the sort of larger mammals kind of at the top and some of the kind of similarities with what you mentioned in terms of rock art in Australia. And I was curious, is there any other kind of ways in which certain species and certain images are organized within the rock art, with the sort of one main one you mentioning around the kind of larger mammals, but other species and the ways in which certain images are commonly found together? Is there sort of a particular kind of symbolic or cultural logic that you've been detecting?
Not that we can see. I mean, we have created like a GIS of 7 panels, and my colleague Mark Robinson have identified thousands of images. At the moment, we cannot see any particular arrangement of these animals. The ones that is very striking is these large mammals. We have what we call the panel of the dantas, as they call it, to the tapires in Colombia. We have another site that is called Nuevo Tolima, that has what appears to be what we call a carpincho or a capybara or a chihuiro right in front. But at the moment, we're investigating these relationships. I can tell you of general patterns. Many of these animals are associated, like humans, with a lot of geometric motifs. Recently, our Polish colleague have done some work in rock art in Peru, and he has associated the rock art of humans associated with geometrics to potentially sound or songs. It's a site with petroglyphs in Peru, very close to Arequipa. Toro Muerto.
Toro Muerto, yeah. Janusz
Muerto.
and Liz, no?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, that is very interesting because he's bringing the ethnographic analogy for the Tucano that are in the area where we are working, and we are working with Tucano people. So many of the animals and the people are associated with geometrics. Is something that we are investigating. Another pattern that we see very often is that handprints is incredible. The amount and diversity of handprints that are at the site is incredible. And sometimes we see like a stamping of handprints close to animals and close to people. But yeah, other particular arrangements is something we are investigating. There are panels that are more organized. There are some panels, I mean, if we go to this panel that we see here, that is called principal panel principal, is so well organized that appear to be, one time that they have painted. Other panels are more disorganized. But this is something that also, when the two rock art specialists that are working with us, Sara Garcés and Hipólito Collado, have been with us, they have been taking samples to see superimposition of some of these panels to try to see, how many layers of paintings, and trying to reconstruct the sequence of painting at the site.
That's fascinating. Thank you for sharing all that detail. I think it's
Okay.
really interesting to think about the like the timing of it too, and how high, like the structures that would have needed to have been built
Yeah.
to get so high on the panel, and you think about all of that labor
Yeah.
to do that, and it wouldn't have been something overnight. So it's very, very interesting to think about the time investment too. So
Yeah, I don't have a picture at the moment here, but obviously when we talk to our Tucano and the Sana colleagues, they say this is not a problem to paint that high, because the ancestral spirits do not have a problem like we humans to get up there. But in La Lindosa, there are a couple of motifs that appear. One is like a wooden tower, like an scaffolded wooden tower, and also we have a ladder there. And for me, the more incredible painting is one that Chiribiquete National Park is just 150 kilometers to the south of La Lindosa, where you can see a picture that shows scaffolding, appears to be wooden scaffolding, with the hammocks of people that appear to be painting on the rocks. That it makes sense because some of these paintings are 10 meters high. Many of the panels could be like 100, they are massive. They could be like 100 meters in length and can go to 10 meters high, and may have several stages that today we can only see them with drones or with very special equipment. But obviously, from a Western perspective, there must have been ladder or some type of scaffolding to be able to reach these heights.
yeah, you think about original climbers and hammocking and kind of being able to tack into the cliffside, right? Different mechanisms that would have been in place. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that detail.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other comments or questions for Dr. Iriarte?
I do have a question. When you were mentioning the megafauna, and to me, when I look at the images, I can totally see the interpretation. And I don't know, there's no doubt in my mind that people knew about megafauna because they were around. But so has there really been a lot of pushback on the interpretation of some of these panels with megafauna?
Yes. Yeah. Well, pushback. No. I would say controversy, because we don't have North Americans like to say the smoking fire of I mean, ideally we would have to date these these paintings, and ideally we would have to find bones of megafauna. So yes, there will always be this controversy, like with the horses. Are these Ice Age horses, or these are the horses brought by the Europeans? The camelid, that for me is the better painted and the most striking example. Still, people say that, well, these Amazonian indigenous people saw camelids in the Andes, and they came and painted them. So yeah, I think that it's always going to be controversial, which make it interesting when you have a productive and constructive conversations and you advance. So yeah, we don't have the final evidence, and well, the megafauna is not our baby. It's just what we are seeing, and we try to compare with with all these large mammals of the Ice Age, and they look very similar.
They do. I found the ground sloth especially to be like a very good interpretation. And so, and it's also because it's not because people see things that they're hunting them or taking them down. So but it is like when you showed it, I was like, that's a ground sloth. That was my first thought, right? Anyway, it's remarkable, truly remarkable.
Well, Gustavo Politis, that is a friend and colleague, disputes this, and he thinks is a jaguar jumping. is not a ground sloth. So like many of these interpretation based on visuals of rock art, they are always going to be controversial.
Of course. Yeah.
And the ground sloth has lacks a tail that is very apparent in the ground sloth. So, but yeah, it's I can say that we have a lot of fun interpreting this
Yes.
this megafauna, and we are not the first one to discover, document the rock art of La Lindosa, but La Lindosa is 13 kilometers of rock walls that we have been progressively documenting. And one of the more interesting things is to every time we get to a new panel is to look for megafauna. We scan it for megafauna.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Iriarte? Okay, I might just ask one other question with obviously as an ethnobotanist, paleoethnobotanist, and all of the plant taxa. Is there some interesting ways in which variability, obviously, from the period of time that these contexts are dating to the distribution of certain plant species today, and the ways in which communities, with some of the engagement, community-centered engagement that you have, that there is interest / sort of kind of different ways in which conversations develop about how plants are used, especially with comments that you made around potentially the kind of mashing and the processing of plants. I was curious to hear a bit about that, the ways in which those species are continuing to be used and engaged with in different food ways and traditions.
Yeah. It was very interesting for us to find that this is the work of Julian Garay, who has been looking at all these palm mesocarp, but also to the nuts, and see all these collapsed tissues. And yes, the very local populations of La Lindosa today have come from all over the country to plant coca. So they have adopted some indigenous ways, other not. But most of the indigenous people who live in the resguardos, who we are collaborating with, prepare different beverages with palms. Not only they eat them raw, but many of them are fermented into chichas. That possibly is what we are seeing here, the preparation of chichas. And another very interesting aspect of that is that by themselves, when the most of the palms are very ripe and stay in the floor and become very maduras in the floor.
Very ripe, very ripe,
Very ripe. They are already fermented, and they can get to, I think Julian has been looking into that. They can get up to like the alcoholics grade of a beer, 4% or more. So something that he's looking into is that maybe the first fermented, he's very interested in the cuisine, in the origins of Amazonian cuisine. And it's interesting that some of these fermented, some of the first fermented beverages may come from palms. And this may be evidence of that. Diachronically, over time, the assemblages remain pretty constant. It's only in the very late Holocene that we see the arrival of maize and manioc to the area. That is related also to Amazonian dark earth that are not in the rock shelters, but are very close to the rivers. And there we have the presence of maize and manioc about 2,500 years before the present. Pretty late with regards to the rest of Amazonia too.
That's really fascinating, the ways in which the natural processes of fruit ripening can kind of be like a connection into sort of later beverage and kind of shifts in food ways. That's fascinating. any other comments and or questions for Dr. Iriarte before we let him finish off his evening with the time difference? Thank you again for joining us with
No,
the
my
time
pleasure.
difference in Exeter. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you again so much. We can say goodbye to our Facebook Live,
Okay.
and as well as stop our recording.
Okay.
So thank you again, Dr. Iriarte, for joining us. And now that we're off Facebook Live, if anyone has any other comments.